2 weeks, 98 points, top of the ladder. On paper, Melbourne Storm are looking fantastic, but in reality, round 2 in Wollongong against the Dragons was an absolute dogfight for the first 60 minutes. I want to talk about why the Dragons looked like champions for that hour, where the Storm struggled, and why the scoreline doesn't really reflect the manner of this game. This game was certainly an interesting watch. I was anxious for most of it, which is not something I feel too often as a Storm fan, and I know I'm really lucky to be able to say that, but it was honestly good to see a contest. You know, as much as I love blowout games, I also love a contest. I guess I kind of got both of those in this game, but let's get into it. While Storm dominated on the scoreboard, the Dragons were actually successfully frustrating Storm's attack for most of this game. They genuinely stifled the Storm for a large portion by compressing their defensive line and aggressively targeting the ruck. When I say compressing their defensive line, I mean that they were bringing their wingers and centres inwards. By doing this, they successfully cut off the passing lanes that someone like Hughes or Grant would use to get the ball to players like Warick or Sewer. I think the Dragons also did an excellent job of wrapping the ball in the tackle and preventing our trademark offloads. They turned this game into a wrestling match and really prevented us from finding our rhythm. They had tactical discipline and a focus on sort of double teaming our forwards, and this meant that instead of playing our usual style of footy where we attack through the middle, we had to play laterally or sideways football. We had to focus on individual success rather than our usual structured attack. One thing that can show this is Melbourne's average play the ball speed during this game. In round 1, it was 3.58 seconds, the average, and in this game it was 3.78 seconds. Now, you may look at that and think that's not really much of a difference, but the statistics don't really tell the whole story in this second round. If you pull apart the data, in the first 60 minutes, our play the ball speed was actually grinding along a lot slower than the average would suggest. The Dragons were killing our momentum. We looked lazy. We were suffocated. But the last 20 minutes of that game when we finally found our tempo brought the average play the ball speed down. So take that stat with a grain of salt. Either way, you can actively see a difference in the play the ball speed. This is one thing the Dragons do really well against us, and I think one of the reasons why we've struggled to win against them for the past 2 years. I also thought there was a lot of ill discipline from us. There was, I think, 6 agains conceded. And even though Dragons at the end, I think, had a pretty similar number, it was just lazy. I do want to note, though, that even though Storm were in a frustrated or pressured state, there was never a point in the game where you thought they were out of it. There was never a point in the game where you thought, oh, it's too far gone. They stayed in the contest and they stayed scoring. So for me, that's a good sign. The scoring was opened by Warick in the 12th minute, closely followed by Jack Howarth in the 15th minute. I've been seeing a lot of people say that Warick isn't the same and he's fallen off since his concussion, but I think he's had a brilliant past 2 games. I think his confidence is coming back, and the more I see him, the more essence of the pre-concussion Warick sort of comes out. He's really getting there. After 2 tries so close together, though, I think people thought Storm were about to run away with this, but the Dragons weren't going to let that happen. The Dragons took the next 2 tries, scoring in the 19th and 28th minute, and followed by a try from Gutho in the 35th minute. This is where things started to get a little scary for me. Just before halftime, I was screaming at Harry Grant to do something, and then immediately after that, he scored, so you're welcome. Valentine Holmes scored again in the 50th minute, and I think this is where a lot of Storm fans were starting to get frustrated. Where was the form we had in round 1? Why has that disappeared? It was a rough 10 to 12 minutes before Sewer went over for a try. This was followed by a second one a couple minutes later, and then a few minutes later he was followed by Jerome Hughes with another one, and then after that he scored again. Sewer was absolutely electric. He was breaking ankles, he was changing directions faster than they knew what to do. I think Dragons fans might be having nightmares about him for the near future. If that wasn't painful enough, Moses Leo went over for a try in the 79th minute, which was then converted by Angus Hinchy, our debut, who came on for Warick around the 74th minute, I believe, and he put the icing on the cake. I do want to give the Dragons some credit, though. They had a genuine injury carnage. I think it was the end of the first half. Daniel Atkinson and Kyle Flanagan sustained ankle injuries, if I'm correct, in the same set, I'm pretty sure. And then in the 62nd minute, Gutho was sent off for a HIA, and this caused a big reshuffle. Valentine Holmes had to move to fullback, Moses Sully switched sides, and then Fiagai was thrust into the defensive line. And if there's something that Melbourne Storm loves, it is a stitched together makeshift defensive line. Storm recognised and exploited this immediately with 5 tries in 18 minutes, and it is an absolutely gut-wrenching way for the Dragons to lose, especially when they were so in it. But Storm are ruthless. If you open the door the tiniest little bit, they will kick it down. Feel free to let me know your comments or thoughts, and I will see you next round.